It's tea time, y'all. Welcome to the third episode of Teatime Tuesday with your favorite interns, Desiree Duran
and Johnny Palmer. Just a quick tea time update. So we have officially moved our show to YouTube, so you can subscribe to our channel at Student Voice and Leadership DPS. Same thing with the rest of our handles though, at SVL DPS on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. So
turn on your notification bells.
Turn on the notification bells. Yeah.
Right now.
Right, we'll give you a second to do it. Thank you.
That's enough.
Okay, what's that? What's the tea? What's
your song of the day today?
My song of the day today is probably From Time by Drake and Janae. What's my song? What's your song of the day today?
Probably Electric Feel by MGMT.
Classic.
It's a bop.
Electric Feel.
But anyways, what's our topic today?
So our topic today is what does it mean to be culturally responsive as a district? So, what do you think? You can get started.
I mean, when you say culturally responsive, I always think automatically culturally competent, but sometimes people can't grasp that part. Sometimes they don't know what that means or what that is or what that looks like. They probably never had that example, never had been talked about it. They probably don't even know what that means,
right.
Being culturally responsive or culturally competent. So how do we expect this from our educators within DPS?
Yeah. So then let's build off of that. So if we're being culturally responsive and culturally competent, in short, that means being able to operate in an environment where there's people who come from various backgrounds and to be able to operate in that environment respectfully. So in order to be for example, to be culturally competent in the space that we work in, me and Desiree are both women of color, obviously, but we two different colors. So as a Black woman, there's triggers for me that don't trigger Desiree and vice versa. And then although we have many cultural similarities, it's not the same.
It's never going to be.
It's never going to be.
I'm never going to be in the same shoes that she's in, and she can't live the same experience that I have.
We'll never live the same experience. Like, I'll never know what it feels
we
like.
We can tell each other how it is, but
100%.
I'm never going to see that through your eyes.
I will never fully understand what it means to be a brown woman in America, and you'll never fully understand what it means to be a Black woman. And that's okay.
Right, that is okay.
Yeah.
But we understand, we still have that middle line where, we're women of color. We understand where we're coming from. We could be there for each other. I'm not going to fully understand or fully get it from your lens, and I never will, and I have to accept that instead of trying to meddle my way in and be like, I know, I understand.
I am oppressed. I seen a post. I know I say this in every time. I seen a post and it was like, I don't have to understand you to fight for you.
Right.
And I was like,
heat.
This the tweet. But that's honestly, I don't have to understand what it's like to be the daughter of immigrants. I don't have to understand what that's like to realize that doesn't define your worth.
Exactly. And me taking the time to understand what it is to be a Black woman in America, just from you speaking to me, I get to be able to be there for you. You're giving me the opportunity to learn, to respect you, and to understand. Even though it's not fully understanding, but it's me understanding that you're going to be different than me. And that's just the truth. I mean, I feel like that's always a narrative within DPS. We're all similar. We all have similarities.
We're all one race.
Yes.
The human race.
But that's the thing, I feel like we fail to understand that we have our differences and that we don't build off of that, Yeah, we have similarities, but what are your differences, And
how do we celebrate those?
Yeah, I want to know what makes you a different individual.
What makes you. Right. And that makes me think of the theory the idea of color blindness, like I don't know how to operate in a room with like a white person who says I don't see color.
And that's very harmful.
If you don't see color, baby, you don't see me.
You're not seeing what I have to go through. You're not acknowledging that I have obstacles and barriers that you don't have. And you say, and I feel like this is when a lot of white people be saying that, like, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. You're not acknowledging what comes with me. You're not acknowledging what comes with my past, my history, none of that. You're not,
because
you're deciding to turn a blind eye.
Literally, you have to be speaking from such a point of privilege,
right?
To be like, I don't see color. You don't have to see color because you've never had to. You've never had to be like, I am this race in this space. Maybe you have. Maybe I can't say that for everybody.
Right.
But it's never been to the point where it's like, oh, I might be in danger because I'm the only person like this in this space, or I fear of insensitivity or like microaggressions because I'm the only person of this race in this space.
Right.
Because racism, we won't even get into that.
It's a lot.
We won't touch that. We won't touch that topic. But
exactly. Like when you say I'm colorblind, it's demeaning. It's disrespectful as well. You're deciding to not see me. When you look at me, I'm going to take pride in the fact that I am a brown woman. But you saying that is like just disregarding the fact that I'm brown. You're disregarding the troubles that comes with it. The
beauty that comes with it.
Right.
Before I'm anything, I'm a black woman. And that shows up in space, obviously. Yeah. We went on a little rant. I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all can see we upset. Let's reel it back in and let's apply this to education and culturally responsive teaching and how as a district we are falling behind, to say it nicely. Yes.
We are lacking that one factor that is very, very important for the rest of the view, for you to understand your students. You know?
So let's break it down. Let's get these statistics. Okay. So EPS is made up of roughly about 93,000 kids. Which is a lot. Of that, 75 to 80% of those kids are students of color. And then to break it down even further, baby, we got the stats. 53% of those students are Hispanic, 25.3% are white, 13.4% are Black and African American / African American, 3.9% are mixed, 3.1% are Asian, 0.7% Native American, and 0.4% are Pacific Islanders. So if there was 4 students in the room, 1 would be white, 2 would be Hispanic, and 1 would be Black, mixed, Asian, Native American, or Pacific Islander.
Just to put that in a little
in perspective, to a mental image for you. So our district is comprised of mostly students of color. But how do our educators look?
There's a flip side to that, because it's 70+% white educators.
Interesting.
So you see that dynamic in which, we don't have representation with who's guiding us, with who's educating us. Right. Which is very problematic, to say the least.
To say the least. And we don't say this meaning like, oh, white people can't teach students of color. That's not what we're trying to say. That's not the narrative that we're trying to put across. But if we're talking about culturally competent and culturally responsive and culturally relevant teaching, that's when it starts to get a little tricky. You know what I mean? Because cultural relevancy comes from lived experience. So you can take all the Afro-American history, all the Chicano history, all the Asian American history classes you want, but if you don't know how it feels to live your everyday life as that, you're never going to be 100% culturally responsive. And that's okay.
That's fine. I feel like a lot of educators themselves be forcing themselves to be like, I want to understand you. I want to be there for you. I want to be there 100%. And you can't be, and that's okay. Nobody's saying that you have to have that point where it's like, oh yeah, I can see what you're going through. You really can't, and that's okay, but don't force it.
Yeah, but it's also like, in my experience, it's been like, I want to understand you, but don't talk about this in class. Don't bring up race. Don't bring up politics. Don't bring up anything in class because it's inappropriate. Okay, so then how are we going to build an understanding of each other if we can't have these conversations?
Because in my narrative too, because then it's much more of like a pity party, you know? It's like
a pity party.
Like, really? I'm so sorry. Like, don't apologize.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that hurts me. Do not apologize for my experiences because don't apologize.
Don't do that.
Please don't do that.
Like the white guilt and the white fragility, like
that white savior complex, all that stuff, toss it out the door.
And it's like, okay, I get it. Your ancestors hurt mine. Yes, I get it. You're sorry.
It's fine. Don't be.
It's not fine. It's not fine.
It's not fine.
But instead of being like, I'm so sorry, okay, use that sorry, that guilt, and help me create a better tomorrow. Like,
because when I say it's not fine, but I say it's fine that you're trying to apologize, but redirect that energy in a sense where you can actually be there for me how I need you to be.
100%.
Don't be apologizing and then disregard the fact that there's a lot of this going on. Like, don't be like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, but we can't talk about this because it's such a taboo topic and all that stuff. Then if you're trying to be there for me without having that guilt trip, without having that, all of that stuff that comes into how you're feeling, how are you going to be there for me? How are you going to be able to put that feelings that you have to work so you can truly be there for me?
And a lot of the time I've heard like the excuse of, oh, like as an educator, I'm not allowed to talk about this, or like I can't say this as an educator.
Busy, baby.
I get it, but also like I've had teachers who be like, y'all,
this is the thing.
Let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Did y'all see the news last night? And it's like, as an educator, you can't impose your beliefs on me. So if I'm like, as an educator, if I'm like, MAGA baby, MAGA, and you're like, no, that's a problem.
Right. That's a
problem when you're like, your ideas are wrong because they don't align with mine. But to open up a conversation where it's like, okay guys, there's this and then there's this. Where do you fall?
What
Why?
do you think? How are you
What do
feeling?
you think? How do you feel? How does this relate to your life? Then that's where you welcome genuine, authentic conversation.
But also setting a space where it's respectful.
Where it's respectful.
Where you're knowing that, hey, we have different views, we have different opinions, that's fine. But I'm going to hear you when you hear me.
And same for the students in the class. Like, set that boundary where it's like, okay guys, I want to talk about this, and I know you guys want to talk about this, but we're finna be respectful. Because I understand this is controversial, and there's deep feelings rooted in this topic, but at the end of the day, we're classmates.
Right.
You need to respect each other. There can be disagreements, but there doesn't need to be arguments. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, I can listen to you, but am I comprehending you?
And we can agree to disagree.
Right. That's fine. Like, I'm never
100%.
Like, we have our different views. We do.
100%.
Right.
100%.
But like, that's never going to give me the reason to disrespect you. Right. That's never going to give me the reason to make you feel as if you're less than, uneducated, all that stuff. Because oftentimes when you're put in a space like that, for example, high school, you're often like, you hear these opinions that you often feel like, okay, I have a different one. I don't feel safe vocalizing that opinion.
And that's because of the culture that has been created in that space. And I wanted to take time to say that this isn't just white teachers. This isn't just white students. This is an issue universally. And just because you're a person of color does not exempt you of not being culturally responsive. Just because you're black or brown does not automatically grant you cultural competence. Just because, like, okay, your lived experience as a person of color is 100% valid. 100% valid. But you still don't know everyone's story. And you're not every single person of color. So yes, like, we can laugh and joke about what happens in our community, but also you need to be respectful of my differences, because the way you grew up ain't the way I grew up.
Right. The same house that you grew up ain't the same house that I grew up in.
The same hood you grew up in ain't the same hood I grew up in.
Right, like,
very different. The same neighborhood you grew up in.
Right.
Like, you could be from Stapleton, baby. I'm from Montbello. we lived very different lives.
Bellside,
and just because our skin color is the same doesn't mean we're the same.
Right. No, like, don't make
assumptions.
I feel like that comes into the thing, like, hey, for example, like, I'm brown, you're brown, we got the same experience. No, we do not. No,
ma'am. No.
It's different for everybody.
100%.
And I feel like a lot of people fail to realize that. And especially for people of color, educators of color, the way that they grew up is very much different from how their students now grew up. You know? There's trauma that's unspoken. There's situations that aren't, there's a lot of factors that aren't spoken of. You know? And just because you feel like you already have made that assumption does not mean that they are going to level up to that. I feel like that's always an exception, like, oh, well, this person is from the same place as I am, so they must experience the same thing. No. You can't just make that.
You can't assume that.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, that assumption in itself is white supremacy. And, like, oh my gosh, that thought just blew my mind. Like, saying it out loud, just like, that action in itself is white supremacy.
Yeah, it is.
Like, if you're grouping us together because
the generalization,
you're generalizing us,
that's
harmful. And it's like,
we busy, baby.
As someone who is very proud of my culture, I love being black, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I understand that my idea of blackness and where I found my blackness isn't the same way that my mother did, my grandmother did. Showed up in very different spaces, especially, we're talking about just you're black, I'm black. But can we talk about you're black, I'm black, but my black grew up here and your black grew up here. Also, like, you're black, I'm black. I was black in the 60s.
Right.
You're black in the 2000s. Like, my grandma's lived experience, I will never, ever understand how it feels to grow up black in Alabama in the 40s. And then to be coming of age during the civil rights movement, to be having children during having black babies during the civil rights. I will never understand how that feels, and I don't want to. Well, I want to, but I don't want to. You know what I mean? Like, I want to learn about that, but I would never want to experience it.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up because, you know, for the example, like, hey, I'm a Latina, but that doesn't mean I'm an immigrant. You know, I'm never going to understand how it felt to cross the border. I'm never going to understand how it was to grow up in such a poverty place like Mexico. You know, like, it's very different things. And that's the thing. So if you were to say that we were, hey, you know, like, I'm black, you're black, you could have grown up in the hood where there was lack of access to food, to resources and everything like that, where I could have grown up in a very gentrified place.
And then when you take all of those differences into account and you bring them, and to tie it back to school, you bring all those differences together in like a pot. And then when we're all in the same spot in a school where the playing field should be leveled because we're not the same person, like we were saying, but we're here for the same reasons, essentially, to learn. So where the playing field should be leveled in that school, it's not, because we aren't acknowledging those differences. And we're not acknowledging the cultural shifts that happen between each and every student that you become.
And it's not just students, it's also with the teachers.
It's also with the, like, as someone who just graduated high school and going to a high school where there was not a lot of teachers of color, and like speaking with those teachers and like hearing their stories about how even in such a professional space that their identity was disregarded or disrespected. People don't talk about that.
No, they don't. They just think that they're in the same setting, and it's, like I've come across teachers as well where it's like, hey, they're tokenized. They're tokenized, and they're at the conferences.
The tokenization of teachers
and
too.
they're all like, can I hear what you're doing with your students and all that stuff. Or they disregard their opinion because they're not there. They're not fully equal to their counterparts.
And only because of what?
Skin color.
The color of my skin.
Right. And it's very disappointing to say the least.
And it baffles me. It like blows my mind that this conversation is still being had, especially around an institution that all kids go to, and that all these kids have been going to. Not all these kids. Hold on, y'all. Let's acknowledge the history. But a space where a lot of kids have been going, like, have been cycled through. And I hate to say the word cycled like that, but for Black and brown students, it's very much so like a process, a grooming situation.
Kind of like a get in and get out thing.
Get in and get out.
Like, it's, and that, I feel like, how do we say cycling in a better way? Because, say for example, there's that one student where it's all like they're genuinely going to learn and stuff like that, but there's that one student who's trying to escape something, who needs to get out of their environment, needs to go into another. There's another person who says like, this is my survival. Like, I feel like
I have tons of friends who are like,
right.
I come to school to get away from what happens to me at home.
Exactly. And then there's and I have friends that are like, you know what, I have survival traits that I have to do within school. It was a shock to me when I had a conversation with this, like, a friend of mine who was like, I feel like I have to survive high school, like I feel like I'm on a thread. Like, graduating, that's a mile goal. That's a picture perfect thing. And it's very hard because there's all these obstacles, there's all these hindrances, there's a lot of factors that play into it. But we don't realize that there's one goal for each student within a space like that. And it's very hard.
I just want to graduate.
I just need to get out.
I just want to graduate.
Like,
and I think, okay, I have 2 points to make. So the first point was, I think that's something, no, I don't want to say the word universal, but I feel like almost universally that people of color from poor communities tend to go through. So it's like, growing up, the expectation was always to graduate high school. Like, it was never like, please graduate high school. It's like, you're going to graduate high school and you're going to go to college. And on the whim of my ancestors' prayers and my hard work, it happened. But that's not the same for everyone else. And like, when I talk to my other like Black and brown friends, it's like, at this point, I'm just trying to graduate. I just want to graduate. And it's never like, I enjoy going to this school and I want to graduate, yes, but I'm also here to learn and to get an education.
Or like, what am I doing further past that then? Like, we just always, like, we're just focused on, here's that. What am I going to do when that's done?
What am I going to do with that?
That's always the question. Like, for example, in middle school, they're always trying to prepare us for high school.
I was not prepared.
I was
not prepared for high school.
The transition was so hard for me.
I was also not prepared for college, if we're being
busy, baby.
Yeah, no.
But hey, that's another topic. Anyway.
The transitions are difficult. And, like, for me, it's always a narrative. Like, I have parents who didn't go past middle school. And for me, they weren't saying, you have to and this and that. But it was I couldn't have this opportunity, so you can. but please succeed. Like, please take advantage of what I didn't have. You know, and it's very hard because that narrative is the same or it's different for each student. You know?
I feel like in some ways it might be the same. Because, I don't know, like, I'm just thinking of, like, the collective of people that I've talked to, and it's always like, I'm doing this for someone. Almost. And it's like,
it's never for yourself.
I feel like for students of color, it's almost never for ourselves. And that's sad. Like, that's sad, and it kind of makes me really sad to think about. Like, I'm sitting here thinking about it. It's like, it's never been like, sure, it's for yourself. Sure it is. Like, I'm gonna graduate, sure. Yeah. But it's also like, I have to do this for my mom.
Right.
I have to do this for my family. You know what I mean?
I want to do this for
and
myself.
Then, like, to relate that back to the institution is, when we're not taking in consideration those circumstances, how do you expect students to feel comfortable in your classroom? Perfect example, my senior year. I'm not gonna say the name of the class, but you probably know if you know me. A AP class that I was in, I had very different circumstances than the people that were in that class. Very different circumstances. Because the collection of students in that class were affluent white kids. I didn't come from an affluent background. I'm not a white kid. So when it was like, okay, let's meet every day, let's do this every day, I can't, I have to work. I have to take care of my grandma. I can't meet with you every day after school. I have things to do. And on top of that, on top of my everyday living circumstances of working and taking care of people and being myself, I have to go to school. And I have to do homework. Busy, and I'm in community, and yes, it's a load that I put on myself, but at the same time, if you're going to say that this space is meant for everybody, don't get mad when people people aren't cookie cut perfect for that space.
And fit the same mold as another person.
And that was a constant issue.
And I feel like that it frustrated me so much, especially in high school, because, you know, like, you're lucky if you're a student who gets to just prioritize education. You're so lucky. You're so lucky, you know. Oftentimes there's people like myself, you know, I had that role where I had to take care of my siblings. I was the caregiver. There's oftentimes where you're an income for the family. Yeah. You know, it's
like, if I don't work, baby, my lights get turned
off. Right, like, you know, there's prioritizations where, you know, like, I have to put food on the table. There's other prioritizations, and that's the thing, you know, like, you get to prioritize education in school, but I can't. It's not that I don't want to, but I just can't.
I can't right now, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think what this is making me think of is, yes, I need you to be understanding. As an educator, I need you to understand where I come from, but that doesn't mean I want you to expect less from me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, there's weeks, all right, I'm working all week, I close all week. Like, when I worked at Harkins, child, I'm working all week, I don't get off of work till like 2 a.m. Like, I'm so sorry, miss, like, this assignment's gonna be a little bit late. I promise I'm still gonna do it. That doesn't mean, no, don't do the assignment. Don't do the assignment.
That I'm not capable.
I just need you to know that I'm going to need a little time for this. And I'm going to be honest with you about what I'm going through, but that doesn't mean that I can't live up to your expectations.
That doesn't mean you have to lower your standards.
You don't have to lower your standards for me. You don't have to do that. I just need you to understand that I am human too, and I have a life that exists outside of this 1 hour class. I don't have time for 6 hours of homework every single day.
Busy, baby.
And yes, I'm still gonna get this done.
Right.
I'm still gonna do it. I just need you to understand. And the word, like, underline the word understand, that my situation and my circumstances aren't the same as every other student in this class. And that is cultural competency. And realizing that not even like the work ethic and blah 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 blah, like, who cares? Not who cares, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But how am I creating an environment where all backgrounds all socioeconomics, all political views, all
Every
races,
aspect.
all gender, every aspect of my life that can somewhat be different, that is a part of the way I identify, is respected. And it's far and few
Right.
that environment is created.
Right. And, like, let's go back to the, it's not just white educators.
It's not just
also educators of color.
It's definitely educators of color.
It's
let me not smoke Starbucks. Sorry, no free advertisement.
I mean, it's just, I feel like I have come across teachers of color where they're like, oh, like, I'm not going to expect the same from you as your white counterparts, because hey, you probably don't have those accesses. Like, for example, I was in AP World History. I was the only person of color. I was a woman. It felt hard. That was the
and
one
it's
time.
not even the work.
And it's not even the work, but the fact that was the one time, and I feel that was a very significant stamp in my life, regardless how small it may seem. But to me, that was the first time where I questioned myself, where I questioned my intelligence, where I was like, am I even capable? Because I didn't have that welcoming teacher where they were like, let's respect each other, let's do this in all topics. One, I got disrespected in that space, and it was during the time where we had the Trump election. Yeah. Two, all these students don't look like me. They all have something to relate to that wasn't able to relate to me.
We busy, baby.
I couldn't build conversation. I felt scared to raise my hand because
That's it.
If I raised my hand and I said something wrong, I automatically felt like I was stupid.
Idiot.
Right. Like I was like,
oh my gosh.
If I was going to ask a question about this, they're probably going to be like, you don't know that.
You don't know that? Yes. Or like, I can't join this conversation because
I don't feel like I can.
I don't know. I don't know, and it's like,
and the teacher never addresses that issue.
Never ever. Like any AP class I've ever been in, one of my AP classes, like the teacher was like, you know the story. If my son was in your class, I'd be afraid for him because he's white. And then like my other AP class where I went to him crying and he was like, I have to go to Chipotle. And my other AP class where
AP classes,
I'm not even gonna do AP classes like that. I'm not even gonna do the teachers like that, because this is all about cultural competency and just being like a decent human being. But hey, we'll get off of that. But
and it goes into the fact that like DPS fails to give our educators that training, that type of education skill, like those skill sets and all that stuff. How they're all like, hey, where you've heard your teacher be like, oh, I had to go to a teacher meeting or something like that. Like I had to be trained to be a teacher or anything like that. But are you really though? If you're not being able to right?
It's not one and done. Like I don't like. It blows my mind that people are like, I went to this implicit bias training and I'm a whole new woman. No, you're not.
I understand everything.
No, you're not.
I feel sorry.
Now, can that implicit bias training give you some tools to take steps to become a whole nother person and to become a great teacher? 100%.
Yes.
But change isn't overnight, baby.
Right.
And it's like,
and especially with topics such as this,
especially with things such as that,
it's not a one thing and done. No,
because even myself, I still struggle with implicit biases.
I do.
And it's like, once I have that thought, I catch myself and I'm like, whoa.
Right, like
that's
4 years back then, I didn't know what a microaggression was, and now every time when I play a role into, like having a microaggression be spoken out of me or something like that, I catch myself. I'm like, was that a microaggression? Did I just? I have to, you have to take accountability. You have to recognize. You have to, learn and know what you're doing might be harmful. It's like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. And I like when you said that training, for example, the equity bootcamp that we did when we were sophomores. I'm assuming so.
What was that, 2017?
Probably.
I think so.
I mean, it was within y'all. So, and we had, a lot of I mean, it was mainly white educators. Well, not just educators, but
it was a good mix, but of course it was mainly white.
Admin, there was principals, all that stuff, you know. And we had this icebreaker, you know, this warm up where we just got to interact with the whole audience and us. And it was so frightening. It was so surprising. It was so baffling to understand that it wasn't just white educators. It was educators of color too that played into this.
Yeah.
And can you tell me one of the questions that we, like, what was it that we had?
Yeah, so to explain what the icebreaker was, it was, so we had everyone stand up, like, before we did anything, like, before we even introduced ourselves. Like, as soon as we got up there, we were like, everybody needs to stand up and close their eyes. And it was like the, if this applies to you, sit down kind of thing. So then,
and you don't get to stand
you
up.
don't stand back up. You stay sitting down.
Yes.
This minute that something applies to you. So like, one of the questions was, have you ever felt like threatened by a student of color?
Or have you ever reprimanded a student for their attitude or their, you know, tone of voice?
Yeah, or like, have you ever called a student of color articulate or like complimented the way they speak? And it's like, I'm like, oh my god, this whole tea time I've been in shock. Yeah. But like, just thinking back to it, there wasn't a single individual in that room that was left standing.
I feel like there was one. I remember
one. There was like one the third time that we did it.
Oh yeah.
But I think she stood back up. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. She was probably lying.
But that's the thing, you know. A lot of these educators who weren't just white, but educators of color too, played into this. And they didn't realize that until we had spoken that.
And even that lady that was left standing, she wasn't of color.
No, she
wasn't a woman of color. And I think like going into that experience, that was the first time I had been like
I was expecting more.
I definitely expected the teachers of color to be standing.
And the fact that like they were shocked too. At the end, we had them open their eyes and look around the room, and it was shocking.
Everyone was sitting down, but us.
And we were just like, "You really, did that?"
And then that was the introduction to how microaggressions affect classroom spaces.
And you know, there's a lot of things that you see that, you know, like some things that you don't see harmful, I made. And you know, I feel like that's where the lack of conversation or communication ties in, because
it's all a conversation.
Right,
it just takes a conversation.
Right, and that's disregarding the fact that it's taboo, that it shouldn't be spoken of.
Why is it taboo though? Like that,
it's going to hurt somebody's feelings.
I hate that word. I hate the word taboo, because it's like, why is it taboo for me to be like, this happens to me, and you're like, whoa, I don't want to talk about that.
Is it taboo because you're recognizing that you're in the wrong? Is it taboo because you're recognizing that you may be racist? Is it taboo because you're realizing that you play into a factor of this? It's all the fact that we're beating around the bush because we don't want to hurt feelings. That's it. That's all it is. You don't want to have that conversation because you're afraid.
It's hurt feelings.
You're afraid of the outcome.
And if we're asking students, we're about to wrap this up, y'all. Sorry, we're going on. But if we're asking students to come in a space where they're not necessarily comfortable, why can't you do the same?
Right.
Why can't you do the same as an adult partner? Because it's like, okay, I'm not super comfortable in this class, but I still come because I have to. But it's like, I don't care that you're not super comfortable with the way that I identify or my truth, but you still need to lend space for me to tell it. You know what I mean? Because my story is just as valuable as yours.
Right. It's just as valid as any other person.
I
matter as much as any other person.
I matter as much as any other person in this room. No one matters more, no one matters less. And it's like, it just like infuriates me that like we can't have conversations because of feelings.
And yes, you know, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be disagreements. That's all a part
of growing.
Right. That's all a part of understanding. And you know what? The fact that you feel like you might get called out on something, the fact that you might resonate with something that I'm saying, does not mean that I am attacking you. It means that
it does not mean I'm attacking you.
Confrontation isn't aggression. Confrontation isn't me being, you know, hey, oh my God, you just said this. And
you're wrong because you're white. No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
No.
I'm not. This isn't about you. And I think people of all races need to realize my story isn't about you.
Right, this ain't no blame game.
I'm giving it to you real, baby. Like this is me. And if who I am hurts who you are in a way that I can't change, my upbringing, the way I was raised, if that hurts your ego, then you need to do some reflecting.
Right.
Because you wouldn't, and my grandma always says this, it's like, if people take offense to you telling the truth, it's because there's something inside of you that don't add up.
Right.
There's some conflict going on with who you believe you are and who you actually are.
And that ties into the thing, you know, like, you don't want to have this conversation, it's because you're avoiding it.
There's a difference.
You're avoiding it. That's it. That's all it is. Don't try to protect my feelings, because I'm not going to protect yours. That's not the case at all.
I'm not going to sugarcoat who I am to make you comfortable.
We busy, baby.
That's the thing. I'm not going to beat around the bush just to make sure that you're okay. Right? We're not pointing fingers like you did this and I did this. No. The fact is that what's happening plays me and you into this thing. And you have to recognize, you have to take accountability, be respectful.
As do I.
Right. And
you know what I mean?
It's like, how are you going to have those conversations when you keep on saying, oh, I can't because of other people's feelings?
Okay, guys, no.
So then how do we get to
understanding?
Right.
How do we grow?
Like, if me and you are having an argument and I can't tell you how I feel, then you're never going to see either.
Or if I invalidate your feelings. Like, if you come up to me and you're like, hey, Johnny, what you said to me the other day, it really hurt my feelings. And I'm like, well, I didn't mean to.
Right, that's the thing. I don't get a say in the fact that I hurt you or not. I don't get a say in that. If you told me that you hurt me, that those are your feelings. And I don't get to invalidate those. I don't get to say, oh, well, you shouldn't have felt this way. No.
Although, yeah, it could be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Like, that wasn't my intention.
That's all, I just need you to recognize the harm that was done.
Right.
I'm sorry. Simple. I didn't mean to. Let me explain.
And that ties into white fragility. You know, if I'm going to call you out and you're giving me these tears, I didn't mean to, this and that. How am I the person ending up to comfort you because you felt attacked over the things that I said?
And I don't want to say like we're the victim, because there's not like a victim complex. Like, our history is our history. Yeah. As dark as it is, there's still so much. There's no escaping it. It happened, but there's still so much beauty in who we are as a people. Right. And
that history ties into who I am now. And your lack of realization to that is disrespectful. That's all it is
in itself.
Right. Like,
your refusal to acknowledge that is disrespectful.
Your refusal to even comprehend or try to is disrespectful. Because how do we grow out of this space or grow out of this, time if we're not able to work forth another thing? How am I going to work for this if you aren't willing to work with me? How are we going to get to the bigger picture if you try to still stay in your comfort zone? Right?
Things never grow from comfort zones.
Right. You have to step out. Regardless if it hurts me, if it hurts you, it has to be done. It has to have, we have to have the conversation. We have to. And I feel like DPS needs to do that now more than ever.
Now more than ever. Now more than ever. Yeah, and we'll leave it off right there. We'll drop it right there. But if any time is the time, now is the time. So that is a wrap up to today's
probably a little
Teatime Tuesday. We were a little passionate, so if you have any questions,
comments.
Please leave them in the comments. Any questions, comments, whatever.
Please interact with us.
Please interact with this.
Tell us how you feel. Tell us if something with like what we said resonated with you. What topics you want to hear from now on forth. Interact with us, please.
Okay. And once again, follow us on all of our platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SVLDPS. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Student Voice and Leadership DPS. And yeah, that's the tea, y'all.
Bye, guys.